Good evening. My name is Sister MaryAnne Huepper, and on behalf of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange, Sister Judith Royer, Stephanie Mejia, and me, I would like to welcome you to the 2021 CSJ Center for Reconciliation and Justice Symposium entitled Faces of Justice, Listening, Discovering, and Transforming. This is our 9th symposium, and once again, the creativity, scholarship, and courageous content of our presenters will unfold, offering hope, encouragement, and challenges over the next 3 days. It is now my great privilege to welcome Bryant Alexander, Dean of the College of Communication and Fine Arts, to introduce our keynote speaker, David Turner.
Good afternoon. I have the pleasure of serving as the Dean for the College of Communication and Fine Arts here at LMU, and it is a pleasure to welcome you all to this important dialogue, and especially exciting to welcome our guest speaker, David C. Turner III. Mr. Turner is an activist scholar from Inglewood, California. He's a doctoral candidate in the Social and Cultural Studies and Education program at UC Berkeley, where his research focuses on youth-based social movements, political identity, and resistance to the prison regime. As a seasoned student organizer and educator, Mr. Turner has helped students in various universities establish cultural centers, negotiate and win demands for racial justice, secure funding and coordinate direct actions across the state of California and the nation. He currently works with boys and men of color in Los Angeles County as the manager of the Brothers, Sons, Selves Coalition, a coalition of community-based organizers working to end the school to prison pipeline and decriminalizing communities of color. As an activist, Mr. Turner has participated in the movement for Black Lives as a political education specialist, helping organizations with teach-ins and designing curriculum. He has been featured in the Chronicle of Higher Education, NBC BLK, that's NBC Black, Stories, Issues, and Opinions from the African American Perspective, and in the New York Times for his activism. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange, our CSJ Center for Reconciliation and Justice, and this symposium entitled Faces of Justice, Listening, Discovering, Transforming, appropriately places Mr. Turner, his politics, his passions, and activist practices in close relation to our current and ongoing community concerns for diversity, equity, and inclusion, a concern to which we at LMU, with our stirring mission statement grounded in the service of faith and the promotion of justice, consistently works to fully realize and activate our commitments and ensuring that we all stand as the face of justice and as activist scholars placing our critical intellectual knowing in the service of practical and political practice in the places that we work and live. We welcome David C. Turner III to both join us and help us in the processes of information, formation, and transformation of self and society to which we claim as part of our university mission. Welcome, welcome, Brother Turner, welcome.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. That might have been one of the best introductions I've ever received. So thank you so much for having me. And if you all don't mind, I'm going to share my screen and we are going to dive straight in. wait, hold on. Just want to make sure I'm giving y'all the right screen now. Okay, and let me see here. We should be good to go. All right, folks. So today have a very short, but what I believe to be potent message, right? And this message is justice is a love language. So, we often see these love language is, they're kind of posted on social media. Oh, I like quality time, or oh, I like, words of affirmation, right? But what does it mean to love injustice, right? What does it mean to believe in justice? What does it mean for justice to be enacted in our communities, right? So we're gonna go on a quick journey. As you can see, members of the Brother Sun Cells Coalition, aka my little homies, in this photo with me. What does justice look like? How do we define justice in the era of disposability? And then how do we seek justice, right? So I fundamentally believe that justice is at its very root, right? Beyond sort of typical notions of core fairness, justice is righting wrongs. It is about righting the wrongs. And in the tradition of the Black freedom struggle here in this country, right, that is one thing that we have done, right, consistently, is righting wrongs, correcting, right, these ills that have happened in our history. So today is the first day of Black History Month, so I figured we'd open with a little bit of history and context. A lot of people, they know names such as Thurgood Marshall. They know names such as Martin Luther King. They know names such as, Rosa Parks. They don't know names like Barbara Johns. So who is Barbara Johns? She was a 16-year-old activist, right, from Prince Edward County, Virginia. Barbara Johns attended a school called Moton High School in Farmville, Virginia. Now, this particular school was so bad that they were teaching classes in old buses. Now, I'm going to say that again, because I'm not sure if everybody heard me. They were teaching classes in buses. What it means to teach a class in a bus is that we don't think that you and people who look like you are worth the investment enough to give you a building for you to learn in. That is the experience that Barbara Johns had. So what do we do with that? What do we do with this type of information? What does she do in this moment? She organized a student strike to advocate for resources. And I'm telling you right now, her work led to the NAACP, right, picking up the case. And this was one of the 5 cases to be considered in Brown versus Board of Education. This 16-year-old girl in some random part of Virginia, in Farmville, Virginia, organized enough to where her school, in her case, was one of the 5 cases to be considered in Brown versus Board of Education, but we don't hear about her. We don't hear about her organizing. We don't hear about her narrative, right? A lot of times we don't hear about youth agency. So I want to bring young people. I want to bring youth into the space, the spirit of young people who have actively fought to right wrongs that are in history. I want to go ahead and name some of these, right? So the folks that you see behind you are part of the Greensboro Four, who today, right, today, 61 years ago, decided that we're not gonna leave. We're not gonna leave this counter until we're served. This helped to initiate a broad sit-in movement, right, that worked to desegregate the South after Brown versus Board of Education. Those four young men, extra regular freshman college students, they were a part of sparking one of the largest desegregation movements here in this country. 17 and 18-year-olds. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale were college students at Merritt College when they founded the Black Panther Party. Regular students at community college when they worked to found one of the most radical organizations, right, that existed here in this country. Regular high school students from East Los Angeles walked out of their schools in 1968 to advocate for the different resources, for the resources that they needed, and also to make sure that they had relevant education, what they call Chicano education, what they call Brown education, to make sure that they had this type of education because they were experiencing a Eurocentric curriculum that wasn't particularly useful for them or their needs. In fact, it tracked folks into different menial jobs that disrespected them and their humanity, and continues to do so today. They walked out because of that. And finally, when we think about the movement for Black lives, when we think about the movement for Black lives and how that has taken off, we have to thank young people in Ferguson, Missouri. We have to thank young people in the state of Florida from the Dream Defenders. We have to thank young people from all across this country who were out there on the streets, and they proclaimed so loudly that Black Lives Matter that the whole world had to hear it. And then the whole world heard it again this past summer with the murder of George Floyd and the organizing that happened because of it. So youth agency, we who believe in freedom, this idea of justice being about correcting the wrongs, righting the wrongs, doing our work to right these wrongs. This work is so critical to our lives, so critical to our movements, so critical to our neighborhoods, so critical to our families, and critical, quite frankly, to who we are as people. So what does it mean to right wrongs? How do we right wrongs? Show you a little throwback clip. So in this photo, you see a picture of me when I was much smaller, picture of my dad, and in the middle, you have this high school English teacher named Mr. Robbins, you know, a guy who looks like he partakes in reggae and some other things. This man was certainly imperfect, but what he did for me was he helped me to recognize that what I was going through in my life wasn't by mistake, it was by design. Mr. Robbins helped me to recognize that inequality was not an accident. It was, in fact, a system of oppression that was working to ensure that people who looked like me didn't have access to certain tools, didn't have access to certain resources, didn't have access, right, to try and transform our conditions. In fact, we were educated specifically not to. He handed me a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I got a chance to read this book. Now, mind you, I'm 16 years old. I'm Googling words left and right. I'm trying to figure out what it means. He goes through a chapter of this book with the rest of our class, focusing on the banking concept of education. And in this, we're learning so much about how our schools, our teachers, the rest of everything that we know has been specifically created to harm our communities, to harm us. And he challenged us. He challenged us to do something about it, to want to change it, to want to transform it. So while you're sitting here looking at this photo from a time when our decent cameras and our cell phones were two different devices, right? What you're also seeing is this man who invested in me and who helped to wake me up to some of those issues that were going on in the world. To me, that's what justice looks like in love. Helping other people to see that there were wrongs and helping to right those wrongs. So what are some other examples of justice as a love language? My old barber. Man, I miss this place. Gentrification has really hit my neighborhood, y'all. I'm from Inglewood, California. Ron's Auto Barbery that was on 110th and Crenshaw. It was a phenomenal place. If you walked in there, you saw history all over the walls. He had newspaper clippings of all the guys who played basketball in the neighborhood. There was a clipping of me up there one day. You know, I mean, I wasn't LeBron James or nothing, but I was excited to be on the wall, you know. And he used to make sure that the local neighborhood guys would get haircuts. Now, granted, you know, I was pretty broke, but he still made sure that I had a haircut. He'll talk your ear off. You'll go in there, you know, expecting to be out in 45 minutes to an hour. You're there for like 3-4 hours. But this man, Mr. Ron, was so fundamental, right, to what I understood as community. He gave me he gave me a haircut, right, a free haircut because I had no money. And that helped me get my first job working at a Foot Action in Carson, right near where I went to school. So again, that is a piece of this love language, right? My basketball coaches, Coach Meekins, Coach Brownlee, Coach Morgan, right? Like these folks looked out for me in ways that, you know, family look out for other family, right? They made sure I ate. They took me to places I needed to go. Their persistence in my life kept me focused and on track, right? Even though I didn't finish high school with a particularly high GPA, right? They kept me on track, and basketball kept me on track, right, for college. My JV coach, Coach Brownlee, actually came to my mother's funeral to support me when my mother had passed in high school. They passed around, you know, an envelope and just gave me and my sister money, just not to support the funeral, not for anything, just to make sure that we were okay. Coach Meekins came out of his own pocket to make sure that I could play basketball at this tournament in Vegas. Got a pretty cold in-game dunk out there too, right? But they made sure that I was taken care of. Again, justice as a love language. My professors, like the guy you see in the afro standing next to me in this picture, like Professor Claybrook, looked out for me in ways that, you know, again, right? Like somebody would look out for their little brother or even their son, right? This brother would meet up with me at night to prep for research presentations. Now, mind you, he has multiple kids. At this point in time, he was in grad school. He's already graduated. He's now, you know, a tenure track faculty at Cal State Long Beach. And this brother invested in me so deeply, right, that he essentially helped me to see the excellence in myself. It's because of him and another professor, Dr. Menashe Farusa, who recently passed, that I'm in a doctorate program now. They saw this young man who walked in there super, super linky and not knowing what's going on, right? And saw me and invested in me enough, right, to get somebody who his high school counselor said doesn't have the academic aptitude to go to college into a PhD program. It's professors like Professor Claybrook, right? That's the reason why I'm here. My undergraduate institution, I went to a place called Cal State Dominguez Hills. That place wouldn't even physically be where it's at without the fire of the Watts Rebellion in 1965. Without these folks in Watts throwing rocks in the cop cars, without these folks in Watts, right, burning buildings, without these folks in Watts leading a 6-day rebellion, I wouldn't have been at the institution that not only gave me my undergraduate degree, but also gave me my wife, who is sitting right there next to me when we were at a demonstration. We met freshman year. We've been together for, it'll be 11 years in March. So when you step up, when you have this notion, this understanding of justice, of believing in justice, of believing, right, in social change, it not only benefits you, it benefits multiple generations after you. So justice is absolutely a love language. But what's happening now? What's going on in our communities? Is this, I mean, these stories, they feel good, right? But why do we still feel what's going on with this, the way our communities are being disposed of? So there are some people who were pretty pissed off at Bill Cosby, rightfully so, because he has some pretty, egregious ways of engaging women, right? Raping them. That is deeply problematic. Bill Cosby has been trash, but we're gonna listen to a speech he gave to understand a little bit about why.
In the old days, you couldn't hooky school because behind every drawn shade was an eye. And before your mother got off the bus into the house, she knew exactly where you had gone, who had gone into the house. Parents don't know that today. I'm talking about these people who cry when their son is standing there in an orange suit. Where were you when he was 2? Where were you when he was 12? Where were you when he was 18? And how come you don't know he had a pistol? These are not political criminals. These are people going around stealing Coca-Cola. People getting shot in the back of the head over a piece of pound cake. And then we all run out and we're outraged. Oh, the cops shouldn't have shot him. What the hell was he doing with the pound cake in his hand? Brown versus the Board of Education is no longer the white person's problem. We've got to take the neighborhood back. We've got to go in there. It's right around the corner. It's standing on the corner. It can't speak English. It doesn't want to speak English. I can't even talk the way these people talk. Why you ain't where you is? Go where? I don't know who these people are. And I blamed the kid until I heard the mother talk. And then I heard the father talk. This is all in the house. Everybody knows it's important to speak English, except these knuckleheads. You can't land a plane with why you ain't where. You can't be a doctor with that kind of crap coming out of your mouth. Why can't you hit the streets? Why can't you clean it out yourself? It's our time now, ladies and gentlemen. It is our time. And I have good news for you. It's not about money. It's about you doing something that ordinarily we do. Get in somebody else's business. It's time for you to not accept this language that these people are speaking, which will take them nowhere. What the hell good is Brown versus the Board of Education if nobody wants it? I mean, this is the future, and all of these people who...
So, as you can hear, he was talking about Black people. He was talking about Black folks and the assumptions that they make about Black folks, young Black folks in particular. This doesn't just happen in Black communities. It happens in Latinx communities as well. It happens in Native communities as well. It happens in communities where people try to justify the conditions that folks exist in. So let's walk through these real fast. So people of color, whether they're Black, Latinx, Native, etc., they don't respect themselves. Therefore, they deserve to be treated poorly. People of color don't need access to resources, education, or power. And finally, right, the implicit point about Bill Cosby's part, right, is that, well, it's not like we gotta care about them, right? Because, you know, they're not a part of our community. One of the fundamental issues, right, about Bill Cosby's inherent assumptions is that it inherently criminalizes, right, the very same people that Brown versus Board of Education were meant to protect. And here you have this man who is out here yelling, right, saying, yo, yeah, you deserve to get shot by the cop. You shouldn't have had the pound cake in his hand. Some of you may not know that those were his politics and his positions, right? You know, but believe me when I say that him falling away from the public eye was probably a really good thing. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because those assumptions about Black folks, right? Those assumptions about who people are, those assumptions about, you know, the idea and the identities of our communities, right? Those assumptions exist within everybody. A Black man was saying that about other Black people. There are some Latinx folks who say that about other Black people, about other Latinx folks. There are white folks who say that about Black people. And these assumptions are inherently rooted in racial disposability. They're rooted in this notion of what's called respectability politics, right? Where if we don't conform to what's called hegemonic standards, if we don't conform to the standards of the mainstream society, if we don't fit into that idea of what it means to be Black, to be a person, then at that point, we're not uplifted. We're not cared about. As a matter of fact, we're disposed of. And we're going to get into that a little bit. So what does that look like? That looks like a lot of you know who the person on the left is. But some of you may not know who the person on the right is. The person on the left is Rosa Parks. What Rosa Parks was not just a random woman who one day was old and tired and wanted to sit down. Rosa Parks had been involved in, the Black struggle for years and was actually working on sexual violence cases when, she was strategically a part of a broader motive, a broader movement to desegregate the South using the Montgomery bus boycotts. She wasn't this old woman who was tired one day. That was strategic. Now, the woman on the right, the young woman on the right, was a teenager named Claudette Cloven, who a lot of people don't know about. She was actually one of the first folks, right, in Montgomery to say, nah, I'm good. I'm not getting up. I'm not really going to go along with segregation. I'm tired. She was actually one of the first. But the reason you don't hear her name is because she was an unwed mother. She was pregnant at the time, and she was a teenager. So what does this mean? What does it mean, right, that here we have two powerful Black women, but one of these Black women you know and the other one you don't. One of these Black women we learn about, the other one we don't really know too much about. What does that mean? It means, right, that even within our own movements, we conform to this idea of disposability. We conform to this idea of, well, maybe everybody's narrative we don't need to have at the center right now. We conform to this idea, this hegemonic idea of, well, maybe this isn't the right time to address this, or maybe that's not the right person to be the face of the struggle. And that is one of the fundamental issues. That's what creates what is called disposability. It's what creates the conditions for disposability. I'm going to play this video real quick so you can get a little sense of what I'm talking about.
My name is Cedric Forte. I'm a junior at Heritage High School, 425.
My name is Jackson Langvort. I'm 18-year-old and I'm a senior at McLean High School. For academic subjects, I'm in Advanced Placement Literature,
English,
Advanced Placement U.S. Government,
Biology,
and Comparative Government,
Art,
Advanced Placement Music Theory,
Health,
Geosystems for Science,
and
Comparative government, y'all. I just got to pause this real quick. Comparative government in high school. All right, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to let the video play.
Algebra.
Men's Chorus,
What's it?
Leadership, and Technical Theater. So I drive and I get here half an hour before school starts every day, just for the fun of it. Trying to park here, if you come in at normal time, is really awful. You end up parking like half a mile away.
A lot of students who go to a school all the way across town have to catch 2 and 3 buses in the subway just to get to school. And I think that, if we have to travel that far just to get education, then we should be able to travel for free.
The kids here are motivated in just about everything. They're motivated to even learn, which is scary to hear for a high school kid. They're motivated to succeed in sports, extracurriculars, anything.
I think they've lost the will to learn. A lot of them. They just don't find school interesting no more because they don't have the power to do anything, and they say so in the classrooms.
This is our auditorium and theater. We have lights, standard light sound. It's not particularly high tech, but we have a nice system.
Here, go to the metal detector. They use this to try to, keep school safe, but obviously it doesn't work because even when someone walks through and it beeps, they don't even search them or anything. They just say, okay, walk back through, empty your pockets. That's all they do.
This is our new studio. It's We're one of 3 high schools in the county who has it. Hey, orchestra, can you start playing? Okay. It's all kids, it's all run, it's all performed, it's all produced by kids.
Well, one thing that these walls, like, they really need to be repainted because the graffiti, as you can see here, they tried to repaint it, but it doesn't blend in. You can actually tell they just, like, really just gave up on repainting the walls. So every teacher in this school buys their own school supplies. And it's actually very sad because, like, the school system should have money to, you know, provide for those school supplies for students, but they don't. And the teachers have to come out of their paychecks just to, you know, be able to support their students.
That's our observatory. It's a giant dome with a telescope, and you could see the entire sky from there. If every school in the country can be like McLean, I think it's really going to increase standard of living, just going to make things a lot better.
Obviously, it's not fair. I mean, we have not even half of what they have. I mean, we're all students. Why shouldn't we receive the things that they have? I mean, we're all trying to learn. We all want to grow up to be something, so why shouldn't we receive the same advantages they have? I don't understand that.
So this has been exacerbated because of COVID. This has actually gotten worse because of COVID. But the politics of disposability means that when a certain group is not considered desirable, they can be disposed of. We're going to read this quote, right, from this book called Disciplining the Poor, Neoliberal Paternalism and the Persistent Power of Race. So in capitalist democracies, the poor occupy a position that is both marginal and central to the social order. Out on the social periphery, they struggle to make ends meet in isolated neighborhoods and rural towns under conditions their fellow citizens encounter mainly as news or entertainment. Do y'all watch Shameless? They are incorporated in partial ways through precarious relationships to the routines and benefits that cement social order and the broader society. Yet the contributions of people who live and work in poverty are also essential for the smooth operation of societal institutions. I'm gonna read that part again. Yet the contributions of people who live and work in poverty are also essential for the smooth operations of social institutions. Now, what social institutions could they possibly be talking about? Maybe police. Maybe they're talking about law enforcement. Maybe they're talking about how prisons are filled largely with folks who have mental health issues and who are too poor to afford bail. Maybe they're talking about the ways how in certain schools, they get more school police than nurses. Maybe what they're talking about, right, the smooth operation of societal institutions, maybe they're talking about the institutions that benefit when kids like Cedric Forte and his peers in school end up in jail or worse. Maybe they're talking about the Black and brown essential workers who have been dying left and right from COVID, right? Who are sitting over here delivering those Grubhub meals, who are sitting over here ringing your stuff up at the grocery stores, who are sitting over here, right, working these drive-thrus, who are the nurses and folks who are on the front lines, like our Southeast Asian friends. When we talk about this idea of people who live and work in poverty, people who are considered disposable, they're essential for the smooth operation of societal institutions. So the politics of disposability is when somebody can get rid of you and still benefit by putting you in the trash. That's what the politics of disposability is. So there are some fundamental logics in inequality, fundamental logics of inequality, fundamental logics, right, that help to inform, why this continues to happen, why we can't find justice. These three logics, right, originally articulated in Learning Power, right, Organizing for Education and Justice, by Jeannie Oakes and John Rogers, right. So they have these three logics, and they're the logic of merit, the logic of deficit, and the logic of scarcity. The logic of merit is that, well, this group worked harder, therefore they should get more. Now, do we believe, right, that, I mean, granted, I don't think Jackson Langhort had it easy, right? I mean, the kid is in high school taking comparative government, right? Like, that should be a college level course. I don't think he had it easy. But he doesn't have to catch 2 and 3 buses to get to school. But somehow they will look at Jackson Langhort and they would say, well, he worked harder to get into whatever college he ended up going to compared to Cedric Forte, because, right, it looks like he worked harder based on his transcript and not necessarily based in the reality of that they had two very different sets of resources. When we talk about the logic of deficit, well, it's something inherently wrong with them in their culture. So if we give them resources, they're just going to waste it. That's exactly the same logic that Bill Cosby had. That's the same logic that Bill Cosby had when he said, oh, well, we're like, it's on us to realize Brown versus Board of Education because they all don't know how to speak English. And if you watch the rest of the speech, he talks about how they have names like Shaniqua and things like that. And it's so fundamentally anti-Black, so fundamentally rooted in anti-Black notions of who we are and what it is that we are as a people, right? That it's suggesting that we are somehow responsible for our own oppression. And then you have the logic of scarcity. Well, I mean, there's only so many resources to go around. There are only so many spots at this school, so we can't admit everybody. There's only so much money to go around. We can't give it to every one of the kids. We can only give it to these groups who are performing better. Some of you may have heard these things before. I literally just got out of a meeting with the Los Angeles Unified School District, and somehow they're making up excuses as to why they can't invest money in the Black students when Black students advocated for the money that they divested from school police in the first place. That's literally where I was right before this call. So don't think that these logics are something that exists in the past. I'm dealing with this as of 5/14 in February 1st, 2021. So David, what does all of this mean? Why are we talking about this? I thought we were supposed to be talking about justice. Well, the problem is that people think that it's right. People think that it's righteous that Black people are experiencing what we're experiencing in this country. They think it's okay because, the logic of merit suggests that if you work hard, you should be okay. The logic of merit will look at somebody like me from Morningside High School and say, well, you did all right. What happened to the rest of your classmates? It's their fault. But won't look at the fact that we had 2 to 3 AP classes compared to some schools that have over 40. Won't look at the fact that we have blacked out windows and crumbling ceilings, but the WNBA had just replaced our basketball gym. Won't look at the fact, right, that where I went to school, You know, we had so many different phenomenal teachers, but they were working with equipment from the 1950s when the school first opened. That's not justice. That's oppression. That's oppression. But what does justice look like? What does it mean? Remember, as we talked about justice, what does it mean to right the wrongs? For me and how I've practiced it, justice looks like organizing. Not just activism, but organizing. Justice looks like building power with regular people to work to transform the conditions that those regular people experience. Activism is important. It's a gateway to organizing, but activism in and of itself is not organizing. Let me tell you why. When you're an activist, you're looking to confront inequality and injustice. You're looking to try and say, look, this is a problem. When you're organizing, you're looking to transform relationships of power and build power with people. That's a fundamentally different thing. When you're an activist, you participate in things. You maybe even help to mobilize things. When you're organizing, it's rooted in long-term strategic planning and building the community's ability to determine what's in its best interest. When you're an activist, it's a gateway to organizing and long-term movement participation. But when you're an organizer, it's a gateway to long-term community empowerment and social transformation, changing our relationships of power. When we talk about power, we're talking about the community's ability to determine itself and its likelihood for itself. That's what we mean when we're talking about power. Organizing is about building power. But David, what does organizing look like? How do we do it? I'll walk you through some steps. Since some of you, or a good number of you, may be college students, I'll walk you through some steps that I went through as a member of the Black Student Union at UC Berkeley in my first year of graduate school. I was a grad student working with the undergrads, trying to get some demands met. So first, you have to identify the problem. Well, what's the issue? At Berkeley at that time, we were less than 3% of the population. Students were dropping out left and right, especially Black students. There was a real hostile racial climate on campus, still is, but there was no place for us to go to address it. So we needed to find a mechanism to help retain the Black students that were there, as well as help to recruit new Black students. That was a part of the problem. So the next part was investigate the problem with impacted communities. So members of the BSU went around to the different entities on campus and asked them, if you had a limitless budget, what would you do to help Black students? So they went to student affairs professionals directly and asked them, what would you do if you had a limitless budget to help improve the outcomes for Black students? What would you do? Wrote that stuff down. Then had several different community meetings and also put out a survey to figure out, yo, what do we need? Black students, holla at me. What do we need? And this wasn't just a process that only included, that only included a couple of folks or just the BSU president. This process was led by a diverse group of Black students. This was led by Black immigrant students. This was led by Black students with disabilities, by Black student athletes, by Black folks who identified as queer, trans, and gender nonconforming, Black women, Black men. Black students who were undocumented. You had Black students from every different type of intersection involved in this organizing process, because we wanted to make sure that we met our bases. From this research, from the different sort of cadre of students that got together, it generated a list of demands and action items from the research. Now we got to figure out, who do we talk to? Who do we engage? So you have to identify the people who have the power to change your conditions. For us, that was the chancellor, who at the time was a guy named Nicholas Dirks. So we ran up on him, presented the problem, and he said, okay, we have an African-American, initiative that we're trying to put together. So, let's see if there's some synergy there. Gave us the head nod. Yeah, this looks great. We want to do something. We want to engage it, so let's do it. And didn't do anything. So this is when we began to escalate. So we tried to negotiate. Negotiations didn't work. Now we have to agitate. So a lot of people think you can just jump straight from, problem to protest. No, it's not that simple. It's not that simple if you want to win the campaign. You want to win the campaign, right? There's a process before you get to the protest part. And the protest part is an escalation strategy with which that you use, right, to begin to escalate the problem. Well, this is where you agitate. With us, first thing didn't work, painted the big C red, black and green. And the big C is this big old blue and gold sort of C symbol that's on this mountain behind Berkeley. So that way, people can know that it's Cal. Painted that red, black, and green. Nah, they kind of didn't care. Then, right, started going to the press. Went to the press to talk about the issues going on with Black students, right? Now, starting to get their attention, we get another meeting, they say, oh, you have to wait. Then comes Cal Day. Cal Day is UC Berkeley's Admitted Students Day. The photo that's behind it, if you can make it out. We go into the middle of Cal Day, put up a big banner that says Black Lives Matter on it, and we refuse to let anybody cross Sather Gate. Sather Gate is the gate that connects you pretty much from the main street and one part of Berkeley's campus to the other part of Berkeley's campus, or the main campus. Nobody can cross that barrier unless you're Black. So that way you can feel the daily nonsense and inconveniences and struggles that Black students feel. The daily barriers that we feel. No, you got to walk around the same way we always have to walk around for everything else. Now we're talking about admissions numbers. Now there are some students, right, who don't feel comfortable going to Berkeley because of the political climate. Now we're talking about the bottom line. Now we're talking about dollars and cents. And now, not only do we have their attention, but now we have our victory. 7 out of 10 of our demands were met. Some of the most important being, right, a $25 million investment, right, into Black scholarships. So that way we can ensure that Black students who are admitted to Berkeley can get paid to actually go to Berkeley. And finally, you also have the creation of the Fannie Lou Hamer Black Resource Center, which is a huge, huge center that's on campus, right, where you can teach classes out of, have workshops, they have a small kitchen. It provided a space where Black people can go and be safe on campus. But we didn't just get that right after that action. We had to renegotiate and then make sure that it was implemented properly. Otherwise, it all could have been lost. Implementation is one of the key pieces of all of this, because you can secure the victory, but if you don't implement it, it's not going to work. So this, right, this process, this cycle is what justice, is what the process of creating justice looks like. Well, what could justice look like in our communities? What could it look like for us trying to transform public safety, trying to change the conditions for our folks? What does that look like? So this is a video of, me doing some work with our Black Lives Matter chapter here in Los Angeles, BLMLA. I was a researcher of a part of the People's Budget. And, this is just a little snippet of what that presentation was like.
All of us are here because we want a better Los Angeles and a better world. This is a moment where the world has cracked open and you all have the opportunity to really be courageous and do something different in the city of Los Angeles. And we see different things happening throughout the country and throughout the world. And then we get this mayor's budget in the midst of a health pandemic with an economic fallout where he's increasing the LAPD budget.
So at the time that we are dying the most, the budget reflects the least resources in communities that are dying.
Overwhelmingly, the call was that we wanted to invest in universal needs and divest in traditional forms of policing. What would it look like if instead of law enforcement shooting people with rubber bullets and tanks, we used some of that money, right, and we used it to invest in the protective equipment for our city workers and the protective equipment of the essential workers who are on the front line? What would it look like if we had that type of infrastructure already in place? Well, now is the time to be bold.
I really want to implore that we do differently. There are so many children here that are going to remember what happened in this crisis and how our leaders chose to act, how our elected officials chose to act and be different and do different. And we need liberation, and you all can be liberators.
Because I'm a mother, and you're a mother, and we all have children that we are trying to make this world better for. We're all connected to each other. We have an opportunity in this moment. You have an opportunity to be courageous. You have an opportunity now to not just say, who am I as a city council member, but whose are you? Do you belong to the Police Protective League? Do you belong to your ambitions? Do you belong to your ego, or do you belong to the people?
So as we close, what does it mean, right, for us to bring justice to our communities? What does it mean for us to bring this love language, right, to our communities? It means divesting from harmful systems and investing in the ones that we know work. It means trusting Black folks. It means trusting Black people in our leadership, trusting Black young folks, right? Trusting Black elders, trusting Black community workers, trusting some of our Black intellectuals who have been putting out information for us to learn and to study so our movements can grow stronger. It means trusting Black folks. It means letting young people lead, getting out of the way, letting them lead, letting them take space, letting them determine what is best for their communities and for them growing up. And finally, it looks like loving Black people in practice, not performance. Universities do this really, really creepy thing where they find Black students and put pictures of them all over their website, where Black students may be invited to talk at panels, but Black students are the last to get housing. It looks like Black students advocating just to express themselves freely. But the university shutting that down and giving money to the college Republicans. It looks like loving Black people in practice looks like ensuring that Black studies departments have the funding that they need to succeed without having to overburden their already overburdened part-time workers who they hire as adjunct lecturers. It looks like giving them tenure track positions. It looks like the BSU not being only consulted when it only comes to race. It looks like the Black Resource Center on campus having the resources that they need to effectively help Black students. It looks like Black students actually getting access, right, to careers and the other things, right, that other students have readily access to, right? It looks like loving Black people in practice, not just in performance. So this is what we mean, right, when we talk about bringing justice to our communities. Because remember, justice is also a love language. Thank you all so much for having me, for bringing me here. I want to give a special shout out, right, to Dr. Stefan Bradley, right, my brother, my comrade, who not only extended this invitation, but just has been so gracious and a model, for what it means to be connected to community, as well as what it means, right, to be a scholar with integrity. Thank you so much for bringing me here. For folks who may want to get in contact with me afterwards, or folks who may want to follow me on social media, please take a quick snapshot of this. Those are my social media handles, both Instagram and Twitter, Dr._Kunta23. You can get my work email to follow up with me. And yes, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here. And yeah, let's get into this conversation.
Good people, I am high as a kite on love. Justice is a love language, said the brother, and I can't feel any better about life. Number one, because the center has done so well to bring David here, but also because I know David's heart. I first met David in the New York Times. I wrote a small timeline of Black student activism, and I was so proud of myself. You see how self-absorbed I am. I was so proud of myself. I got the paper issue and I started reading through it, and I got to see the New York Times featured the nation's most influential student activists. And there was this beautiful Black man, David Turner, standing proud and telling us what he was doing out there in Berkeley. And so when I got ready to come to Los Angeles, my students who were A1 day ones, that is, they were the first ones on the line in Ferguson, Missouri, when the people decided to stand for their own rights. They told me, you have to hook up with somebody when you go out there. And it was David Turner. And so I'm high off of the fact that I've been able to meet with and learn from David Turner like you all have. And I'm also high off the fact that I might just be worth my salt, because my earlier Black History lecture to a group featured all of the same pictures that David featured in his. And so I might be smart. Look, so go ahead on.
So hey, we right here, man.
There, come on with it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open this up for questions. There's several questions already, but one question I did want to ask, and this might just break the ice a little bit, is I mentioned to you about my students who knew you, and you mentioned the actions that you all took while you were both in college and in graduate school. The question that I had was, how did you get beyond the fear of what could happen to you and the self-absorption of you know, it's somebody else's problem, really. It's not my problem. So this is something that young people always want to know. Like, they're like, I don't know if I could do this, and I don't know if it's even my problem to deal with. How did you get beyond that? When we talk about Barbara Johns, when we talk about Claudette Colvin, what's that feeling? What is it that you did? Was there a technique?
Well, you see, and this is why I'm so grateful for people like Mr. Robbins, right? Because it is very easy to say, well, it's not my problem, until you learn that it is your problem. Until you learn, right, that not only is it your problem, but it's the exact reason why certain things have happened in your community. I don't know a single woman or femme identified person who has not experienced sexual assault, almost escaped sexual assault, who has not consulted somebody who has been sexually assaulted, or who has not been afraid of sexual assault at some point in time in their lives. I don't know a single woman, right, who has not experienced one of those things. So when the broader movement, right, happened, you know, that was Me Too, right? Like, we saw so much transformation, and we also saw, right, a whole lot of dudes, right, go down for that. And that was because so many people experienced it. But a lot of times when people experience it, maybe they don't have the language to articulate what's happening, until other people say, oh crap, that happened to you? Oh shit, me too. You can't go to a black barbershop and bring up the police and everybody has had all positive experiences. You might get one brother who says, nah, man, you shouldn't be cutting up, because you're always gonna have one, right? You know, but everybody else is gonna be like, hell no, I got pulled over because my tail light was too dim. Or I got pulled over because I made a right turn too slowly. Or one time I got pulled over because my tail lights were too bright. So I think, Dr. Bradley, to that point, right, it's helpful when folks begin to see that those issues that they think don't affect them do affect them. And oftentimes people don't have the language to articulate it, or people don't know what's happening. And that's one of the most insidious parts of oppression. It has helped us to sort of like not see, but it's helped us to sort of like not necessarily understand what's going on, and in fact participate in our own oppression. And once we learn how to change that, once we learn how to transform that, that is when we start to see change happening.
I greatly appreciate that. Everybody, there's a Q&A section that you can place your question in down there. I also wanted to say out loud, I don't know if everybody knew this, but your mentor, Professor Claybrook, Keith Claybrook, was an LMU alumnus and an AFAM major out here, and so we're very proud of him. And in fact, he helped to start a Black Alumni Association out here, which is totally on brand with Keith Claybrook, and he just had a book come out, as a matter of fact. So everybody support your mentor. We'll be celebrating your book in the next 3 years or so. And I'm just putting that in the air, Somebody asked a question about Zaytuna College. Was it in existence when you were at Berkeley? And was there any interaction that you had with them at all, with the college?
I don't actually know what that is. Let me just do it. Unfortunately, I'm not too sure on what Zaytuna College is. I did my coursework at Berkeley um, between 2014 and 2016.
Got you. Got you.
So that's when I did my coursework up there. If it wasn't a part of some of the central organizing on campus, then I most likely didn't know what it was. I'm looking at it now, and it's looking like it's looking like its own college. For the person who asked that question, was it directly connected with Berkeley, or was it just a Bay Area thing?
I don't know. Why don't we push right now and see if they can get it into, okay, let's see what they got here. Bay Area, it looks like, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, then I probably wouldn't know anything about it. I know I definitely know some folks who probably would, but I know me personally, I probably wouldn't know.
Yeah. Okay. While we're waiting on the next question, just to keep time with this, you happen to know about LMU. You grew up in LA, and you know that it costs a pretty little penny sometimes to come here. And we see students like, let me see if I get this name right, Jackson Langford, and sometimes the students who come from maybe Jackson Langford's position eventually want to know, what should they do? Like, how, they come from a McLean high school, like what should they do to address the disparities or to help? How could they be in solidarity is the new catchphrase, and that sort of thing. How could they be part of the solution rather than the problem?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Jackson actually mentioned toward the end something that was very concrete, which is that if every school was like McLean, then it'll increase the standards of living, right? So what happens, right, when Jackson begins to organize his friends and his peers to ensure that other schools get telescopes, right? To ensure that other schools, right, have theaters, to ensure that other schools have their own newsrooms, right? Like, so I think especially, and if I could be frank, I'll speak specifically to white folks here. There is a desire among white folks to be, connected to communities of color, because you understand, right, that there's injustice that has happened, and that you want to try to right those wrongs. But the most effective organizing you can do is actually among other white people. I'll tell you right now, I've been in boys and men of color work for the last 9 years. I've been engaged in, working with boys, helping boys to understand their identities, helping boys to grow political consciousness, right? And I've also helped boys address some of the behaviors that some people would characterize as toxic masculinity, right? Like, whether we're talking about, over sexualizing women, whether we're talking about, misogyny, whether we're talking about, just the typical patriarchal tendencies of a teenage boy, right? I've been working to transform those directly with young men for the last 9 years, and it's been pretty effective. It's been pretty effective, right? Like, these young folks aren't engaged in a lot of those things, right? Because they become a part of programs and they get connected with people, right, who help them to see the world differently. And this is what we need our white allies to do the most. We need you to help other white folks see the world differently, to help other white folks see that every school should be like a McLean.
Thank you for that. Here's another question, and I'm gonna hit you with one or two at a time so that we can make sure to get them in. What are some of the most meaningful ways that students and community Students in Community and Activism has informed who you are as a young scholar. And then another quick question here was, did the campus police at Cal get involved with the blocking of the main gate with the banner? Did any other students say anything to y'all at that point? So.
It's actually funny. The police didn't do anything. And I mean, well, again, right? Like, you know, campus police are beholden to students, you know? So campus police, while campus police are still police, right? Like they still pepper spray and beat up and harass students, right? Like it's not like Berkeley PD, you know, where we did that in the city, you know, tear gas would have came out. You know, so we understood that, right? Like they're not Oakland PD, you know, where Oakland PD would have shot us, right? Like, you know, so like I think that there's a very clear sort of difference between, you know, different jurisdictions of law enforcement, right? So we understood that and we knew that. And because we knew that, we took that, we used that to our advantage to then block state the gate. Now, most of the students, they kind of sucked their teeth and just went along with it. But it was really older white dudes who were the most problems for us. They would literally rush us to try and get past the barrier because they believed, how dare we, you know, these Negroes try and block their way? How dare we, us Negroes, try and prevent them from doing what they were gonna do? How dare we stand in the way of their whiteness? So for that particular action, students didn't do anything. Young people didn't do anything. The moms didn't do anything. It was older white dudes. They were the main ones.
Let me ask you this. Along those lines, here's a question. How do you suggest we deal with people who just do not want to listen or learn about what's actually going on in our society, or directly just deny the whole thing?
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question?
Yes, sir. How do you suggest we deal with the people who just do not want to listen or learn about what's actually going on in our society, or directly just want to deny the whole, you know, that something's going on at all?
Everybody who is over 70, their mama would say, or they would say that they were a part of the civil rights movement. They probably wasn't. They probably wasn't. Civil rights movement, very few people actually supported it. Very few people, even fewer people are even a part of it, right? So you don't need everybody to create change. You need enough. There's everybody and then there's enough. And not only, right, is it the people, but you also have to remember that you have political targets, right? So what exactly are you trying to change? Are you trying to change some form of a policy or practice? If so, then you need to make sure that you got the hearts and minds of the people that's voting on the shit that you organizing for. If you try to change a culture or a practice, right, then who has the power to ensure that particular cultural change is a part of, you know, your movement, right? If it's the regular people, then yeah, individual folks are gonna have to step up. But right, like the ways in which you do it, are you gonna do it publicly? Are you gonna launch a campaign that's gonna target media? Are you gonna try to help people change their thinking? Right? I'm not sure if y'all have seen it, right? But go on Netflix and start looking at action films. There are way more femme and women identified folks who are now leads in action films, right? Now, again, this is part of a broader cultural shift, right? That, you know, has been led by feminist folks who were saying that women not only don't have lead roles, but even when they're speaking in movies, it's always in relation to men. How come women don't get the chance to have, you know, their own sort of autonomy? Who did they target? They targeted film companies. They targeted film companies and they targeted the scripts And then they ran analyses on the different scripts. So again, right, like, so when we're talking about like what it is you want to change or how you want to change it, you have to remember, right, that once you identify a plan, once you know who your targets are, and once you can imagine the type of world that you want to see, that's who you go for. Because everybody's not going to agree with you. There were 74 million people who voted for Trump. It's a lot of damn people. We can get some of them. We ain't gonna get everybody. And that's okay. We don't need all of them.
Yeah, no, and one of the things I always remind people about is it took 50 some white males to create the United States of America on the backs of a whole bunch of other people. Like, imagine what we could do, if we got together. So a couple real quick questions. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. How can we address Black solidarities as allies across communities of color? That's one. Number two, let's see. Could you speak a little bit more of what we need to know about your meeting with the LA Unified District? And so that might take a long time, but see if you can handle those, as briefly as possible, I guess.
Well, so real quick, I'll try to address them both really fast. Essentially, right, like LAUSD been tripping. But I'll tell you right now, for the campaign for school to defund school police, it was a multiracial movement. It was a multiracial movement in which the movement collectively decided that we're going to center the needs, experiences, and identities of Black students and Black people in order to make a change, right? This was a direct result, right, this was a direct result of Black folks in the movement saying, yo, we need, right, like our allies to support Black leadership. We need our allies to support Black folks leading in this moment. And what happened, right, allies said, bet, what's the plan? Let's move. So I think one of the best ways to support, stronger relationships between, communities of color, right, is quite frankly to trust each other. To trust each other. When Trump first got elected, and when our Latinx folks said, yo, ICE is about to start wilding, Black folks were like, bet, what we gotta do? What's up? Just tell us where we gotta be and we gonna show up. When Native folks were in Standing Rock trying to transform, right, like what was going on over there because they was gonna run that Keystone Pipeline and they ended up doing it anyway, running that Keystone Pipeline, they said, yo, we need people to pull up. It's cold as hell. We ain't got no infrastructure. You probably gonna get wet, but we need people to pull up. What did Black folks do? They just pulled up and said, bet, what do you need us to do? So I think the best allyship is showing up when people need you, how they need you. That's one of the best ways to build alliances, one of the best ways to build trust, one of the best ways to work together. There are some things that need to explicitly be Black and brown. Some things that explicitly need to be, Native and Latinx. Some things that explicitly need to be, API and Black. Those are called coalitions. Coalitions work where people come together and have a unified goal that individually they cannot achieve, but collectively they can achieve. When you come in there really clearly and define that, that is how you achieve something. I manage a coalition of young people of color. These are the little homies you see behind me, right? Like these young folks, again, Southeast Asian, Black, brown folks, right? Like we get together, we conspire together. We understand that criminalization impacts all of us, albeit differently, but it impacts all of us. But we know that we need to collectively change these conditions, and we cannot do that alone. So we do it together. It's that mutual agreement and that trust that allows you to do that. But you can't build an alliance with somebody you don't fucking know. Relationships in organizing is 90% of organizing. You need to know people. And you need to build relationships with these people. When you build relationships, you build that trust, right? That's what helps you to mobilize folks when it's time for things to go down. That's what helps you in those negotiation things, when things are getting real tense, right? For your movement to stay together, is because you built relationships. Otherwise, it's gonna crumble. The FBI tore us up because folks didn't have good relationships, and they exploited that fact. We can't let that happen again.
Brother. Justice is a love language. You said we have to trust each other. We have to be unafraid. We have to be able to identify the PowerPoints, as you mentioned. You've given us so much, and we greatly appreciate your time. I want to say this. Let's be clear about this. This young man is about to finish his PhD, and I hope somebody is thinking along the lines of what do we do with wildly intelligent young people who finish their PhDs at a university. I hope somebody's thinking along those lines. This young man is also fighting for the freedom of all of us. And I hope that we remember that. And the best payment we could ever give you is to pay attention to your movement, to your campaign, to offer our solidarity and to be with you. So with that in mind, I'm with you, little brother. I'm with you, and I appreciate you, and we appreciate you at LMU, the Center for Reconciliation and Justice. We appreciate you. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over. Thank you so much, and many blessings to you, many blessings to the movement.
Thank you so much. Thank y'all for having me. This has been dope. Man, I can't wait till social distancing is over so I can actually see people in person. And, we could do that thing after the conference where, like, you didn't get to ask your question, but you could ask me over here, or we can go get something to eat afterward. I'm definitely looking forward to those moments again as soon as, we're able to reconvene. But this has been, this has been amazing. It's been exceptional. Thank you so much, Dr. Bradley, for this. Really appreciate all of you all for having me. Thank you so much.
Right on, right on.